Um, yeah, good morning. It's April 14. April's the cruelest month, according to T.S. Eliot. Um, and it's snowing, and it's kind of amazing. Like, what kind of world do we live in? Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me. That was this morning. With delight. Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight. What a line from Mary Oliver. That is someone who is in touch with what's real and the beauty of and the mystery of life, which is ever present. I love how she says the ordinary, the mundane, not the extraordinary. That there's something about that we have the possibility of being in the world with this kind of delight, which we see in kids. What a morning we've had already, when it comes to mystery and wonder and delight and joy. I'm not saying life is only those things. In fact, as you know, it's what hurts that makes joy and light all the more savory, we could say. So we've been going around the wheel here. I've been talking about Terra, a year of surrendering to Earth's intelligence. That's a line from Rilke. What might our year be like if we just every once in a while kept returning to, oh yes, that's right, we're on the Earth. Here we are. We're in a cycle that we didn't invent. Imagine that. Every single day we're participating in something that we didn't make, called nature and the way things are and the seasons. You can't even control them. God, you want to, but you can't. So what's it like to surrender to that kind of intelligence? And so the next couple weeks, and today primarily, I want to return to the wheel. And if you would for a minute, just look at this map. Again, this map comes from Bill Plotkin, one of my teachers. And a map is just a map. I always feel like I need to say that every once in a while. A map is not the same thing as the terrain, as they say. A map is a metaphor, it's a symbol, it's a pointer. And it's helpful in as much as it's helpful. So what maps do, they sort of orient us to the field. And we're like, oh yes, okay, and it helps us recognize the patterns. And what I love about this map, what is this map about? This map is a way of talking about human wholeness in dialogue with nature. That's what it is. It's a way of talking about human wholeness, our potentialities when it comes to wholeness, and nature. How are we related to the natural cycles and the way things are? Well, we know we are intellectually, but we sometimes forget it in our modern life. And I'm not against the modern world. There's not enough land for us to go back to foraging, for example. So the modern world has its complexities. But as you all know, it can create a kind of forgetfulness when it comes to the way things are, when it comes to the natural world, in other words. So it's a map of human wholeness that's related to nature itself and to the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, which is in I was going to exaggerate. Well, I'll just go ahead and exaggerate. It's in every major religious tradition that I know of, at least, and probably in many religious or spiritual traditions that I don't know anything about. It's even right in the middle of the cross, considering that it's Holy Week in the Christian tradition, where the entire Christian narrative starts looking toward this Good Friday cross experience, which is an intersection of north, south, east, west on one level. So anyway, that was just an aside. Okay, so what have we done so far as a community? I don't want to go over the whole thing. That's what the podcast is for, and the Facebook. Just go back in time if you want. But we have discussed the West. We've discussed the North. And now we get the privilege of wading into the East. So the archetypes for the West were the muse beloved. It's the much more shadowy, mysterious, the sun goes down, darkness. Now I'm redoing the whole thing. Poetry, metaphor, symbol, that's the West. And we have these capacities in us already. That's part of the assumption of this map. Maybe they're not fully developed, but we have the universal human capacity for these archetypes. The north was the nurturing generative adult. That was the phrase we used, the archetypal phrase, the nurturing generative adult. You have that capacity. Everybody has that capacity. Even bad parents have the capacity, at least, to be nurturing generative adults. We talked about the north. We talked about what happens during the winter season, a settling down and a preparation at the same time. The north can ask questions like, what would it look like to think about the next 7 generations? Very north, nurturing kind of question. And now we move around to the east. So I want to begin with your associations with the word east. And don't think too hard. Just what comes to mind? Free association. East is home, sunrise. New York City. Okay. Asia, so the Far East. Okay, what else? Sunrise. Someone said mystical. That's interesting. Okay. What hasn't been said that's on your mind? Ocean. Okay. Light. A cold wind. Okay. The Wicked Witch. Yes. Now that's a whole rabbit hole that I'd like to go down, but I'll probably get to it next week. Okay? Seriously. I've been thinking a lot about the Wizard of Oz. I'm about to go on a major tangent that I don't have time for. But, the Wizard of Oz. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to tell myself, Kent, make a whole teaching about the Wizard of Oz. Okay. It's coming. I'll make a whole teaching about the Wizard of Oz. Oh, yes. Anything else that's missing from that list? Okay, that's Eastern Hindu. Okay. Violets like an east window. Okay, that's where we're going to camp out, in fact. Let me ask one other question. What time of year do you associate with the east? Spring. Why? Because the frickin' sun comes back. That's why. Yes. So, what am I saying? We just described both associations that we have and also observations about the natural world. And we can already tell, okay, there's something to this word east that's different than a word like west, or different than a word like north, or different than a word like south. And some of the themes that you brought forth are very east-like things. New beginnings, sunrise. At the very beginning of a day, if you wake up in the morning, which I recommend, Thomas Merton says once a year, you should set your alarm and watch the sunrise. That's an odd instruction, but experiencing the sunrise is a lot different than a sunset. In some ways, a sunset is a little bit easier, right? Sunrise is a little bit more effort, but to experience a sunrise, at least for me, it's like something is dawning, literally. And you have a kind of feeling about the day when you watch the sun creep up and bring the world from darkness to that twilight-ish to, light. It's amazing. It's an amazing experience. So there's something to that. And there's something that awakens in us, which is part of my point, when we're in touch with East-like things. When you spend time with a flower. Or what does Mary Oliver say at the end of this poem? Prayers that are made out of grass. I promise you, I swear, when I saw that my lawn was becoming more green, I felt like there's a reason to live. Honestly, it's like what's waking up in the natural world also helps us wake up to something. It creates a kind of living conversation. And the East, at least sometimes, I've had a whole flood of, it doesn't always happen because it can happen in the West also, for me at least, a whole flood of creative ideas. Like, man, I would really like to fill in the blank. Like clean up my lawn from all these sticks. It's like the stick apocalypse right now. Like, what happened? The Wicked Witch of the East came and knocked all the sticks down, and now it's going to make me do something. But anyway, like, what might I accomplish in the coming spring? And also, the days get longer. And you can feel that. You're like, wow, except daylight savings time, which messes with me existentially. If there was no thing called the clock, we would feel much more that the days are getting longer. And here we are. We have more opportunities. So that's that. Those are some of the relations between the natural world and what's happening in the cycle of the season, and what's also true of our own psyches, and the kind of conversation that can happen between the two. So the archetype, if you look at the map of the East, is called the innocent sage, or the sacred fool, or the trickster. I think all four count, but I want to sort of take them one at a time, the sort of innocent sage. And I like innocent slash sage as a kind of combination. So a few months ago, a lawyer decided, didn't decide, he had some business to take care of. So he flew from JFK to Tel Aviv. And he was a really successful lawyer and a very, very smart lawyer. And he thought part of his smartness was, I'm going to ride and coach, So I've got the money, but I'm going to ride and coach. So he decides to ride and coach to save a little money. And he's back there and he sits down, this lawyer, and next to him is a rabbi. Okay? And the rabbi, sort of settles in and looks like he's about to go to sleep. But the lawyer is like, it's going to be a long flight. It's a day flight. So he sort of taps the lawyer on the shoulder and says, hey, this is going to be a long flight. It's going to take 12 hours. So let's play a little game. The rabbi sort of nods and says, okay, let's hear what you have to say. And the lawyer says this. He says, all right, here's the game. I want you to ask me a question, anything at all, any question. And if I can't figure out the answer, I'm going to pay you $1,000. All right, so you ask me a question. If I cannot figure out the answer, I'm going to pay you $1,000. All right? If I figure the answer out, you only have to pay me 10. So the rabbi says, okay, all right, we'll play the game. So nothing really happens for a little while. Maybe the rabbi's thinking. After a while, the lawyer taps him on the shoulder again and says, hey, what about this game? The rabbi looks at him and says, okay. What goes up the mountain on 4 legs and comes down on 3 legs? And the lawyer thinks for a minute. Can't come up with anything right away, and the rabbi goes to sleep. And the lawyer can't let it go. He's like, what goes up the mountain on 4 legs and comes down on 3 legs? He doesn't want to lose $1,000. He's trying to save money on flying coach. So what goes up there? So the rabbi's out cold, so he starts asking people on the plane, what do you think? What goes up the mountain on 4 legs, comes down on 3 legs? Nobody can think of it. He finds somebody that has internet access. He's like, let's Google it. Google's it. Can't find anything. Not even Google knows. It's like, what is going on? So after a while, enough is enough. He's frustrated, taps the rabbi on the shoulder, wakes him up. Says, Rabbi, I've never been asked a question like this. Hands him $1,000. Says, I don't know. I have no idea what goes up the mountain on 4 legs and comes down on 3. Rabbi goes back to sleep. Puts some money in his pocket, goes back to sleep. And the lawyer he's just like, what is going on? And he cannot let the thing go. And so finally he wakes the rabbi up again, says, Rabbi, you won $1,000 fair and square. I agree with you 100%. I don't want the money back, but it's killing me. I must know what goes up the mountain on 4 legs and comes down on 3 legs. Rabbi reaches in his pocket, pulls out $10 and gives it to the lawyer. You sort of slowly got that one, I guess. Some of you are probably thinking, did that really happen? Wait, was he telling you something? Okay, that's the innocent sage. That's part of the innocent sage dynamic. The innocent sage is playful. It's serious and playful at the same time. What the rabbi does in the joke is funny. But it's also wise at the same time. He tricks the lawyer in a funny way. That's the innocent sage. And what I'd like to say, yes, of course, some people are funnier than others, but as an innate human capacity, you have the capacity to also be the innocent sage in your whole life, in your life. Some lightness, some humor, especially around the most serious and important things. Like I heard apparently Pope John Paul said once, how many people work at the Vatican? And he said, I'd say about half of them, you know? See, that's the innocent sage. That's not taking yourself too seriously. That's a clue. When people take themselves too seriously, they've lost that innocence. They've lost their sense of humor. They can't laugh at themselves. And even right now, if you start thinking of sages, like if I were to do the same thing and like name a sage, like let's think of one, the Dalai Lama, for example. He's very sage-like, would you agree? Very wise. What is he always doing? Laughing, like almost nonstop. That's all he does. Is he'll say like devastating things. Like it seems like humanity is totally lost, and he'll just laugh. Like what is funny about that? Well, he's tapped into that kind of innocent sage dynamic. And if you struggle in this area, probably you know yourself to be a very serious person. And let's say you think about yourself as a very serious person, you probably know what it's like. There's probably one or two people on earth that can really make you laugh, correct? Am I correct in saying that? And you might really bust out. This can happen to very serious people. Because in a way, they've lost that capacity, or they need to cultivate that capacity, and they really like so-and-so because it brings it out. It brings out this kind of way of being in the world. So the innocent sage is that kind of lightness, sense of humor. And let's take a bit of these things a bit further. So sage, here's what comes to mind when I say a word like sage. Wisdom, or long vision, or if you take Egyptian mythology, you have the pharaoh, and on top of the pharaoh, you have Horus, and Horus is a falcon of some sort who has an eye for long seeing. That's that sage-like long-term vision. Think about a hawk circling. The falcon or the hawk is the only animal on earth that has better eyes than human beings. So it's no wonder it shows up in myths and in statues, because there's something about that long-term vision that we need, correct? And if you're going to have a good leader, they better have Horus on their head. They better be able to see. Otherwise, they're blind. Otherwise, they can't see, and that's not good for anybody. So that's sort of innocent sage, mountaintop kind of view. The sage is the one, I think, who teaches us to let go of what we're clinging to discover something deeper. That's almost like the job of the sage. I just thought of something. When Jesus says to the rich person, sell all you have and give to the poor. Interesting phrase, correct? On one level, it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with attachment, most likely. That's my interpretation of that thing. For some reason, this person is attached. And if he could learn to let that go, he could sink to a deeper level. Do you get what I'm saying? That's that sage-like quality. And let me ask you a very straightforward question. Do we need sages in our world? Oh my word, it's almost like it's ridiculous. And that, I bring this up all the time, but I think it's such a metaphor for our culture. That ticker at the bottom of CNN screams urgency, 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 or whatever. It's Fox News, or they all have them. Okay, even ESPN, the score. Well, now the score is this. Oh, now the score is this. That has nothing to do with sage-like wisdom. Would you agree? Absolutely nothing. Because that's the opposite of long-term vision. That's the opposite of Eye of Horus. That's the opposite of a mountaintop view of things that says, let's climb up and get a broader perspective. But you have that capacity, and sometimes it needs to be cultivated. Sometimes you can be too hemmed in to your own way of seeing the world. So that's the sage. The innocence is a lot of what was coming up in the kids' message time. What is innocence? There's a kind of presence or present-centeredness to innocence. Wouldn't you agree? Usually an expression of innocence is someone is just at home with where they are, like a kid. Just here they are, going about their whatever it is the kids do. See, the funny thing about innocence and childlikeness is that without question, you had it. Wouldn't you agree? Even if you had a difficult childhood, and let's not forget that a difficult childhood can rob kids of innocence, correct? But even if you had some difficulty, you probably had moments. You know what that childlikeness is, correct? But you lose it. Everybody loses it. Everybody loses it to a certain extent. It's also part of how we survive into adulthood. Part of growing wise is recovering that. That's what the teaching, the Buddhist teaching, is about, that emphasizes the beginner's mind. The beginner has recovered a bit of their elemental innocence. A beginner says, I don't know. The expert says, I know, and that shuts the door. Correct? I already know, I figured it out, door closed. That's the opposite of the beginner's mind. So spiritual growth, or that's what I would call it at least, or growth in this facet of wholeness looks like recovering a bit of that innocence. And honestly, playing outside can help. I mean, one of the kids said, what would you do to become more childlike? And the kid said, play a game. That is the Dalai Lama saying that to you, play a game, or to me. Honestly. Are you tracking with me so far? Okay. What else could we say about innocence? Now, here's a little line. Love, here's what the innocence in us has the capacity to do. To love as if we'd never been hurt before. You've been hurt. Unless you're if you haven't been hurt by love, please come see me afterwards. And I'll try to convince you you're just in denial. But recovering the capacity to love as if you haven't been hurt before. Or to dance like the kids as if no one's watching. It would be funny, and also just funny in the trickster kind of way, if we reversed it and the kids sat and you all danced during that time. Like, you like it. You're like, oh, the kids are dancing. That's so cute. What's cute about it is one thing. The facet of wholeness is what's beneath that. You have that capacity. Now, you let kids do it for you. And I'm not saying if this turns into a dancing kind of community, I don't know about this. No, but seriously, we let other people live that out for us. It's a capacity that you have, which I think can be recovered. So what else might I want to say along these lines? Okay, what else would the East facet of wholeness be connected with? The East facet of wholeness is the part of us that is attracted to the transcendent. I'm not saying it is the transcendent, but it's attracted to the transcendent. Just like if we go in the reverse, the West part of us is what's attracted to the underworld, to the descent, to soul, to the abyss, to the darkness and the mysteries. On the opposite end, the East is what's the capacity in us to be attracted to the transcendent, to oneness, to spirit, to union, to big view of things, to climbing up. Sometimes I think about, I have all these friends that are big time into, what do they call it? Peak bagging. Doing as many mountaintop peaks as possible. Mountaineers is the kind of people I'm talking about. And I think, what is it that they want? Well, part of it is just that momentary taste of being as high as you can get. Taste of transcendence, large view of things. That's that part of the East that pulls us in that direction. And you have it, and I have it, and we all have it. This longing for transcendence. What is transcendence in the most simple sense? It's transcending who you think you are in the world. And it's not exactly something that you choose. It's more like something that happens to you. All of a sudden you find yourself, whoa, I just had an experience, and now I see the world differently. Now I see myself differently. And it's like the blinders come off. See again to the Horus with the eye, The blinders come off. That's what the feeling is like. It's a moment of transcendence. And it can be cultivated. Not that you can manufacture spirit kinds of encounters. I'm not saying that. There's no formula like A, B, and C, and you'll have an experience of transcendence. But you can practice in such a way to open yourself up to this possibility. That's what meditation is. Letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. What are you letting go of? My world, my ideas, my thoughts. And you're emptying the container as a practice. And one day, there's like a taste of something else. That's what meditation does. Have I made sense? So that's that capacity for transcendence that I think we all have. What else might I want to say here? I might go even a little bit bigger. The East points the way toward the non-dual, non-attachment, or in a more simple sense, toward enlightenment. It's not the same thing as enlightenment, but it points in that direction. The non-dual, the both and, the paradox of things, and that non-attachment, that way of being in the world that is not attached. Okay, and the final archetype here, so we've talked about the innocent, the sage, the capacity for transcendence, which I would call the sacred. But now let's talk about the foolish component, the sacred fool. Sacred fool, or the trickster. That's, again, a bit embodied in the little joke I had about the rabbi, but what is this trickster-like character? In fact, I want to hear from you, like we did with the East. I want you to name some trickster-like people in our culture right now. What do you come up with? Trickster, sacred fool. Who are the tricksters? Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is very much a trickster, actually, because he infuriatingly keeps changing his style all the time. You're like, well, we want the old Bob Dylan, you know? But he changes his style, and he is a trickster. He plays with really deep things in a playful way. What else? Who? The Trumpster. Never heard him refer. Everyone's like, oh, a little rumble here. Went from Bob Dylan to Trump. That's interesting. I don't know about that. I think we'd have to have a longer discussion. I don't see him so much as a trickster. The trickster is not the same thing as a liar. And I mean, we all lie. Let's just be honest. I lie all the time. But he may have some trickster components to him. One time he made a joke about his hair, and I thought, there it is. Seriously, I thought if he could get closer to that, first of all, he'd be way more likable. But, one of the sad things is that apparently they're not doing the White House Correspondents' Dinner anymore. That's an opportunity to play with this trickster, sacred fool dynamic, to make fun of who we think we are. And to say we can't do that sort of cuts off that. I think it's a capacity for wholeness. Other trickster figures. Okay. Yeah, and perhaps the entire show of Seinfeld is very trickster energy about our culture. Playing, and almost every single episode, they're playing with something that, at least back then, was in the cultural conversation, right? And they're playing with it in a very funny way, very interesting way. Other sort of sacred fool. Stephen Colbert, yes, especially the Colbert Report, the original show, because he was playing a character, and the character, he was very committed to the character, and sometimes you were like, can you ever break out of this? But that's a very trickster move. I'm going to play a character. And if you think of tricksters archetypally, you have the jester. You have the trickster in Shakespearean literature that is often the idiot who tells the truth. That's the kind of dynamic. Or the Navajos have the clowns in their sacred ceremonies. They're busy doing all this like really serious sacred stuff, and the clown comes and pushes people over and does all this crazy stuff. You're like, what is going on? That's that trickster dynamic. It's going to come in and play with the truth in a kind of clever way. Anybody else come to mind? All of a sudden, we just took the lid off, and I heard nothing. Charles Barkley. I do sports. I just pretend that I don't, but I really do. I pretend to be more enlightened than I am. That's called lying, by the way. Charles Barkley, yeah, he's a funny dude, no doubt. But I don't know enough about his sort of persona to say. Um, Anybody else that's really burning that you think definitely? Okay, Robin Williams for sure. Yeah, I really like Robin Williams because to me he actually embodies the trickster figure more than anyone we've named so far. Now, he's a comedian, so on one level, you could just say anyone who's a comedian has a bit of this energy. But he was so, like, at times, like, is he going to blow up? Like, if you watch his stand up, you think, like, his head might literally explode. Or if you were actually in the room with him, you would not want to be close to him. I mean, he's just like a whirlwind of energy, like a tornado. But in that sense, the tornado keeps tapping almost every single culturally sensitive issue, but because you're laughing, it can get closer to the truth. And that's part of what the trickster does. Makes you laugh about things you don't want to go near. The really good ones get you laughing about all the stuff that's off limits, all the taboos. So that's part of that trickster kind. Now, you might think to yourself, like I do, well, I can't do that. All right, I'm not saying go be Robin Williams. I'm saying you too, though, do actually have the capacity to not take yourself as seriously. And to not take others as seriously. And to look for the humor in things. And to play with the truth. Because after all, we're actually, most of us, whether extrovert or an introvert, there's a sense that the soul is a bit of a shy thing. And just to be laughing about ourselves helps it come out of hiding a bit. That's that kind of trickster dynamics. Let me read you some things from Bill Plotkin's book here, just so you can feel if you've ever had access to this facet of wholeness. You know you've accessed your innocent sage whenever it feels like, to you, as if a veil has lifted and you're able to see a situation, a person, a place in utter clarity. And you wonder how you could have been so blind for so long. Ever experienced anything like that? How in the world could I be? That's that clarity, that's a bit of the East coming through. Like burning through the sheets of clouds. Like the fog finally rolls out. And you're like, how could I have been so blind? It's a bit of that East-like quality coming in. Here's another one. Or when you instinctually lighten up a tense social situation with just the right quip. Have you ever done that? Now you might say, well, actually that's my brother, not me. Okay, or something like that. But I bet you have done it a little bit. And if you say, if this is a real struggle for me, hey, this is an opportunity for you to grow. You really can. You don't have to be a comedian. But just the right quip lightens the situation just a little bit. So, when you instinctually lighten up a tense social situation with just the right quip, or if you ever took a social, professional, or artistic risk, even though you knew you would look foolish. That's that sacred fool. Okay? You take a risk even though you know you'll look foolish, or perhaps even because you would look foolish. That's a whole nother level of sort of conscious attention. That means entering into a social situation or taking a risk at your job, and you say, I'm going to look like an idiot, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's inhabiting a bit of this energy. So is the East, am I painting a picture that's making some sense to you? I'll have a bit more to say about it next week, I think. But I thought of something. Did I mention anything about Palm Sunday? Okay, I didn't. Okay, good. I can't tell sometimes because I think of things and I don't know if I say them. Okay, so Palm Sunday, all around the world, Christians are gathering today, and they're waving palm branches, and they're celebrating Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem. Okay? Do you know what the story actually says that Jesus is doing? He's crying. Now, what is going on? You would think, now if I entered Jerusalem and people were waving palm branches, you know what I would do? Thank you. Thank you. I see you there. Keep it up. Thank you. I see that palm branch. He's weeping. That's the sacred fool. That is embodying the sacred fool. He's weeping because on one level, that's not what this is about. Getting together and being really happy that the big man has arrived in the city. And he's weeping. That is the sacred fool, all wrapped up right there. And the very next day, by the way, he does something also very sacred foolish, which is he goes into the temple, and instead of crying, he's angry. And he turns over tables. And he causes a big scene. Looking foolish on one level. Isn't that interesting? So I think there's something to this story even that seems to embody. That's the ability to see what's beneath the surface. I see that you're all doing something by waving palm branches. That's not what this is about. That's that vision. That's that mountaintop-like vision that can see just beyond what the group mob is up to. And in a sense, it breaks his heart that people can't see. But imagine that. The king who weeps. Now that's a paradox. And the innocent sage is a paradox. You know? So, and I'll probably have a little more to say about this next week, because what we haven't talked about is the inner ring, the immature expressions of the East facet of wholeness. So I'll bring those out a little bit next week. And I also want to talk about what does Easter, Passover, this time of year have to do with the East? Because it's this time of year for a reason. And we might want to look at that. What are people doing this time of year? What are the symbols and archetypes that are in the culture and also in us that resonate? Okay? All right. I've tried to, if you remember, I know I'm going a little bit long, but I want to give you some homework because I know people really love homework, and it's just the one thing I know. But I've tried to, each time I've introduced these things, to give you a little bit of homework, because without it, you're like, that was an interesting idea. So I've got two things I want to invite you into. And if you want extra credit, you can combine them. All right? So here's the first invitation. This week, between now and next Sunday, I want to invite you on what I'm going to call a praise walk. And here's the very simple invitation. I want you, it's best done in the morning, because after all, that's when the sun comes up and we're thinking a bit about the East. I'd invite you to go out in the morning. It's even great before breakfast as the sun is coming up, and to go out and to wander. It could be in your neighborhood, it could be in a park, with no particular aim in mind. You're just going to wander, and I want you to praise everything that comes into your field of awareness that strikes you in some way. And I don't mean praise God for that particular thing, or I mean praise the thing itself. As if you were meeting another being or a friend and you wanted to say something nice about that friend. What would you say? And I want you to encourage you to do it out loud. So yes, people would think, that person really? I knew they were crazy. See that? They're outside talking to themselves. But that's the invitation. That's the simple practice of a praise walk. To move around out in the wild world, or even in your neighborhood. And I'm thinking of the natural world primarily. I suppose you could praise your mailbox if it really does strike you as. But I mean things that you're kind of amazed, like a cardinal comes and lands on a branch. What would you say to the cardinal? And praise the thing just for being the thing itself. That's tapping into Mary Oliver saying, every day I see something and that more or less kills me with delight. So that's the practice. Here's practice number 2 that's related. And that is a kind of meditation walk that is done with your eyes and your senses open, because the window of knowing in the East are your 5 senses. So instead of emptying yourself of thoughts and images, you open yourself on this meditation walk. You can do it, you can combine it with the praise walk. I said, P.S., extra credit. But you walk and you try to first tap into, what am I actually seeing? What am I hearing? What's going on in my imagination? What am I smelling? Wake up all those senses, but hang on to none of them. That's what I mean about a meditation walk. You hear the bird, And you don't create a whole story about the origin of birds and then you're all the way to Darwin, okay? You just, I heard that and I let the thing go and I see what else comes into my seeing and my tasting and my, you can taste trees. They're actually quite tasty. And you taste a tree and you don't make a whole story about it. You let the thing go. Again, you'll be thought of as a crazy person, so fair warning. But that's a kind of meditation walk that has the East facet. Have I made sense? Okay. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.